Hello, hello. Welcome to the first ever Behind the Design with coaches Brandon and Daniel. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, but we are stoked to launch this new series. Happy New Year, everyone. And if you know anything about OPEX coaches, you know not only do they love coaching and learning, but they also love educating. So we're here today to do a little bit of all of those things. And I'm going to let the guys take it away. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. So 10 plus years with coaching in some shape or form, and I've owned and managed a CrossFit gym, but as of now, I'm doing remote coaching full time. So took that step and also doing some projects related to coaching that I find fun and meaningful on the side. So yeah, that's kind of who I am.
Amazing.
Next. Cool. Yeah.
Go for it, B.
So I'm Coach Brandon. Big background as well, about 10 years of coaching myself, maybe a little bit less. Same kind of background as Daniel, had a couple gyms that I've owned and ran in the early parts of my career. And then last 5 years been traveling, training a lot of professional athletes and MMA specifically. And now I'm back home, excited, working on some big projects, especially this. This is something I've been looking forward to doing. And I think one of the things, like Candace said, educating is something I personally love doing. And I'm really excited to be able to kind of share a lot of this stuff and take head with this with Daniel and really kind of make this special place for coaches to learn. And then obviously, give feedback and whatnot for anything OPEX or anybody else who's interested.
Yeah, we are in fact live. So I just want to remind you that the comments are open. So as the guys walk you through the client scenario that we are sharing today, as well as walk you through the thinking and the decision-making behind the programming, as well as sharing the programming live, feel free to jump in with any questions and I'll tee those up for answering. We appreciate any participation here. And if you're watching in the replay, leave us a comment and we'll get back to you there. We plan to do this weekly. Fingers crossed we can keep it all together. I'm in Arizona, Brandon's in New York, Daniel's in Sweden, and we are here to serve. So I'll let you guys take it away.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So I think today what we're going to really focus on. So one of the cool things about this to start is that not only are me and Daniel going to be working on this together, but we're also working together on, programming as well. I've been helping Daniel with his program design over the last about 3 months. And we've been working together to kind of help revamp his training, focus on a couple things inside of his program design and everything he's been working on for his goals for fitness. So it's been a really cool opportunity. I was really excited when Daniel, came to me and asked me to help him with this. And yeah, so we sat down, we talked, and one of the things we're going to do today is just show you guys a little bit of the behind the scenes of how we've been handling his programming, how we've been kind of going back and forth, because it's been great to have a guy like Daniel, who is a full-time remote coach and is an OPEX coach, to really sharpen my tools, and then vice versa for him. I think it's been good for us to kind of go back and forth and have these conversations in programming. So I want Daniel to kind of give a little bit of a background, kind of like you did for me when we first sat down, of, what the goals were, what you were trying to achieve, why you made this transition into having someone look over your programming and help you with it. And then I want to dive into a little bit of the how I built the program, some of the features on CoachRx that help with that stuff, and dive into that stuff a little bit deeper. So Daniel, if you want to start, take that away. We can dive into that.
Yeah, because I reached out to you just with my own training. I always, through the years, I think it's beneficial to kind of have the training as your own lab, testing out principles, playing with stuff that you maybe want to kind of put into the design for your clients. But on the other side of that is also, I think it's useful as a coach to be coached and put yourself in the client shoes and kind of experiencing the client journey, just to make sure to keep that relatable and yeah, just to experience that, as well as learning from other coaches, because there's always stuff you pick up. And we've discussed this. I've picked up already stuff that I want to put in my design, and we have had great conversations. And I kind of were at the place where I was kind of done with experimenting with my own training, wanted to kind of focus and dial in on that. So I reached out to you and knowing you are an OPEX ambassador, having an OPEX background, that kind of ensures me that you rely on good principles and something that's gonna resonate with me and how I want to take things forward. So that was kind of important to me. So and then we had kind of a startup consultation where I've where I'm at right now is I do a lot of coaching and design, and I wanted you to take over the wheel, but I still wanted some kind of clear stuff to start chasing. And one thing that has been back in my head for a very long time, just since I've been quite close a few times to pull a 3x bodyweight deadlift. So that was a fun thing to kind of have as a goal, as well as the last year I've found kind of running as a nice athletic expression, or keeps what for one, I've realized that it's quite nice for my mental health to run, and it's a nice form of exercise. It's also taken me back to I look at it as quite like primal form of fitness. It's just get your shoes on and get out and running.
Honestly, I used to hate running so much, and as of recent, this past year, ran 2 half marathons, and I found a new love for it. So
yeah, 100%. And it's quite a good, from what I feel, counterbalance to chasing that deadlift, but keep kind of the running in as guarding my kind of overall athletic feeling. So that's kind of our starting point, really.
yeah, and I think when Daniel came to me, one of the biggest things, like I said, that was exciting for me was kind of the same thing that he mentioned. It's knowing it's a coach who's in the OPEX method and has those principles and has his sort of background with training, having that transition. Like, he's someone who knows how he wants to treat his clients, and one, knows how to be a great client too. Even though he was, like he's saying, I want to go through that client journey. Like, he's someone who knows how to be a great client, which means feedback, which means communication, which means kind of, you know, really refining the details that we go through each week. And when we sat down, I remember one of the big things you first started with was the 3x deadlift. Like, that was the big thing. You're like, I want to pull 3 times my body weight. And that's kind of the main focus. You also were kind of, giving me some information in regards to how you wanted to kind of just find some structure in it again, because you felt a little bit like lackluster in the training, and you just wanted something to be able to pull up, look at, have all the things, trust it, and then go from there. So,
Yeah.
well, when we originally sat down, there's a lot of things that go into my head when I hear that sort of thing. And obviously when you start to talk about, it's nice when you have someone who just sits down and is like, hey, I have a specific goal that I want to achieve. Here's the number I want to hit. And really everything else around that right now is extra credit, but I really, like, this is my focus. And obviously that doesn't happen with every single client. And I don't think that happens with probably 95% of the clients you're going to deal with. Not many of them are going to come in with the experience and, I guess, desire of like such a specific thing as a Daniel. So it makes my job a lot easier. But even in that setting, you still having that initial conversation, sitting down and listening, right? Because even if it is, hey, Daniel wants to pull a 3x deadlift, we also want to put ourselves in a position to make sure we're doing that in the right capacity, fitting in the other things that he wants to do. Obviously, he's an online coach. He has a lot of things that he has to do throughout his day in regards to like client upkeep and making sure he's on point for that stuff. So we want to make sure he's moving in the right way, but also fitting in his life, right? And we want to make sure that we're designing all this stuff. And that's really the whole point of this, this weekly video series we're going to put on, is to show you the process of taking someone like Daniel, how we can design it, how we can make it really efficient, and kind of plug the pieces and make something beautiful in regards to a program. So, on Coach RX, there's a lot of cool things that make this easy. And if we can get the actual screen up, there we go. So one of the things I really loved about, obviously the calendar here, was being able to create my own like welcome to training with me. And it's just a checklist I made that kind of goes all the way down with everything that I need before we even get started, which is, making sure we're working on the app walkthrough. So I have a little initial video that kind of shows everybody what they need, when they need it, that sort of thing. So they can just click on this as if it's like a movement demo. Someone can click on that and it gives them a whole walkthrough on how to actually use the app, filling out the intake form, signing the contract and waiver, adding their payment method, reading all the BG Perform documents. I have a few documents on there that just kind of talk about the SOPs, the training philosophy, how I coach, and then our referral program. And then just a section to fill out with the equipment, if there was any specific equipment needed on there, to make sure that I have everything that we need. And we just go from there and just get ready. So when we sat down with Daniel, and Daniel, what I want you, like, if there's anything you want to plug in here with like your feedback on how we obviously worked with some of this stuff, please feel free. So the main thing, obviously sitting down with Daniel, was he wanted to 3x his deadlift and he wanted to still run. Cause at the time, we're still running daily, but he had you ran for 100 days in a row, right?
Yeah. So I was, I think I was about like 60 or 70 days in when we started this conversation. So yeah, at the time I was doing the
yeah. So he was that like a chosen goal, or was that just something that like came up random, or how'd you go about choosing that?
I think it's going back to structure and finding just something in my training to hold on to, because it was kind of in the phase where I was playing around with principles and I've done kind of my own design for a while. But at least for me, that usually ends up being very like low structure. So and then it just felt like, okay, I just need something to create some rhythm over the day, something I do daily, and I jumped on that. Running for 100 days. I usually not a big fan of kind of days, let's say a 30 days challenge, because I want to take responsibility for day 31 as well. And but that was more of a kind of, it's been fun to be able to do it and kind of celebrate the way I've kind of reclaimed the capacity to run. So that was kind of the background to that 100 days of running.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, and I think that's a great thing. And I think sometimes I'm a big believer too, like outside of all this, sometimes even if you're just having to get structure, like finding something that is easy enough, such as running or some other anything that is fitness really that you can continuously do each day, is just a great way to kind of get yourself into the habit of moving. But so when we sat down, obviously, and what I like about this is, what I want to go over quickly, is that there was a couple things that we did program design early on that I think were great, but might have been a little aggressive in what we were trying to do. And I think there's a lot of things that I want to go over inside of how we designed it, how I kind of went through some things, and then some of the mistakes I've made and some of the things that, we kind of tweaked as we went through it to make sure it fit Daniel's life better and made sure he was focusing on the right things. Cause there's a couple things within the first month that we discussed, which I'll go over in a second. But as you can see here, we basically had a 5-day or 6-day split. We were having an upper day on Monday. We're having a run on Tuesday. We're having a lower day on Wednesday, another run on Thursday, a nice bodybuilding day, which I'll get to in a second, on Friday, recovery day on Saturday, and then a longer run on Sunday. And this was basically the layout for the first month, right? And one of the things that, if you notice, I had on the lifting days was this concept called condensed conjugate, right? And if you're familiar with the concept of conjugate training is a very famous, powerlifting, I guess we'll call it, framework of getting really strong. It was created by Louis Simmons in West Side Barbell, if you're familiar with that gym as well. One of probably the most successful and strongest gyms in California at the time. I believe it was in California. I think it was the West Coast. But so when I was first started training a lot of the MMA fighters, one of the biggest things inside of MMA is efficiency in training and being as efficient as possible, and really finding the minimum effective dose as early as you can, just because there's so much you kind of have to organize in the week and structure in the week. So one of the things I took away from this was this idea of condensed conjugate, which is essentially taking conjugate and taking it as a 4-day split and turning it into a 2-day split, right? So if you look at these first 2 days here, we have the upper engine and then we have the lower engine. And we'll go over specifically the upper engine first, but have a nice full dynamic warm up working from, I like to work basically from like the ground up, working from the open book stretch into the YTWs, into shoulder swimmers, into the scapular push-ups. Then we have our base support, which is the heel to toe walks, heel walks, and toe walks. Then we got our knee hugs, single leg RDLs, and hip airplanes. And these are, something I always do before every single movement I do, or session that I do for lower body, and something I like to do for the people that I work with, because the warm up is a place that we can get a lot done early on and make sure we're ready to move. But what I like to do is make sure we're moving in the right direction for understanding where our body's at. And if we can kind of keep some of the same movements inside of the warm up, I find that we're able to understand how we feel a little bit more, right? It's hard when you're changing things all the time, because if it's a new movement, you don't really know how you're feeling that day. But if you know, like, hey, I do single leg RDLs every single day. Today I'm feeling a little bit unstable, a little bit unbalanced. Then you can kind of take that into the actual session yourself and adjust from there. Other thing I implemented in here was just some lower.
Just on that, I think people in general they change the warm up too much. Because but for me, it's, as you mentioned, it's a nice way. If I keep it like consistent, I'm going to notice if something's off. But if I keep, like, if I have a high variance in how I warm up, it's not going to be as clear reference from the other days. So I think there's a huge benefit in keeping kind of the warm up kind of comprehensive, so you can have it on several days, just to make sure that you can go through everything, kind of feel out, is anything off, or does anything feel different today? So I think that's a big one for that. It's been good for me to just keep that reminder on kind of assess, is everything feeling all right today, rather than just improvising a warm up and just go. So it's been nice.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons I've always done that is myself. Like you just said, if you're changing something every single time that you go out there, you're never going to get that baseline of like, how do I actually feel today? Because imagine if every single time you had to go out there and do a new movement that you have to learn, one, you're never actually going to get good at it. And for me, the single leg RDL and the hip airplanes are probably two of the most important movements in regards to hip health and performance too. Like when you talk about actual sport performance, the hip airplanes probably one of the most important, if not the most important movements we can do. And, if you're either doing them not consistently, or you're changing the warm up every single week, like, one, you have to go into a warm up and learn right away. And the whole point of a warm up is to make sure we're getting ready for like the workout, right? And obviously there's pieces that you can add to it, which might be tempos, it might be isolation holds, it might be weight, it might be resistance, different type of resistances for each of these movements. But like Daniel said, and this is something that I think a lot of people do too much of, is change in general. But then specifically in the warm up, it's nice to just know, like, hey, I know what I have to do for the warm up. I'm going to do it before every single session. I'm going to know how I feel, and you can always adjust from there. Once you get that baseline of, hey, I've done this for a couple months, now we can progress it. Now we can start to add some ISO holds in, or we can start to change, some of the patterns that we're actually working on and progress them slowly. Because inside the warm up, we can get a lot of like really good work done, but we also don't want to just take away from the session. We want it to be something that they're comfortable with, they get into, they can get warmed up, and then just go right into the session, right? And then in regards to health and performance as well, one of the little things I like to do here at the bottom are the low level plyometrics. So we have the banded pogos, the single leg banded pogos, switch foot pogos, and the extensive knee jumps. And these are just beginner level things to keep that, the springiness in the feet, to keep the tendon health good in the Achilles and the foot, because this is something that, in regards to staying athletic year round, and being able to, introduce new aspects, not only just for like health in regards to running, but health in regards to like performance. The low level plyometrics give us that little barrier of entry to say, hey, if we want to tweak things up in programming or tweak things, into a different style, we have that almost like that athletic, like we sprinkle it on top just a little bit to make sure it's in there. And one of the reasons I love this for, not only someone like Daniel, but like an athlete, like I was, let's say, Ian, for example, there's a lot of times in programming where we'd have off time. We'd have like months where it's off time, and then it's like, hey, I have a fight in 3 weeks. And the low level plyometrics actually keeps us in that position to say, hey, we're going from, having that bounciness, getting, a certain amount of contacts at the ground each and every session, to, all right, now we have to get into a full camp and we only have 4 weeks. And that allows us that transition a little bit safer. So we're not dealing with a lot of that transition from, okay, we went from nothing to 100%, right? So these low level plyometrics help us with that springiness. They help us with that, that ability to transition, and they help us with the ability to just keep the foot a little bit stronger and the tendon health, long term, keep it a little bit healthier. Was that something you found beneficial in utilizing for the warm-ups?
Yeah, it's I think also with, because this concept was quite, or like this warm-ups was quite new to me. So in the beginning it was more just getting to know all the exercises, and but then you get into a rhythm. When you know it, you get more out of it, like with any program. So yeah, it's been nice to just kind of just guard that athleticism in the warm-up, if that makes sense. So
yeah. And I think one of the things too to understand when you're going for strength, right? When you have some sort of strength goal, speed is such a big portion of that, and that springiness and that quickness. Like, it's such a big piece of the initiation of a lift. It's a big piece in being able to lift a lot of weight, just because that speed and that quickness, it really translates into getting the weight off the ground or getting you from that starting position. And then obviously strength kind of takes you through the rest of that. So one of the things getting into the actual program design here was with condensed conjugate. If you are familiar with it, or with regular conjugate, if you're familiar with it, the first day of conjugate has more of a speed day, right? Or you can kind of organize it however sees fit, but it's usually an upper body max effort day, dynamic effort day, and then a max effort lower, and then a dynamic effort lower. So usually how that's done is it can be like max effort upper, max effort lower, or it can be max effort upper, dynamic effort lower, that sort of thing. And you can kind of organize it however makes sense for your schedule. But with condensed conjugate, the only difference is we're taking that dynamic effort piece and we're just placing it on top of the actual session for the day. Now, the best way to do this is if you have a upper body day planned, then we're going to go with a dynamic effort lower on top of the upper day, just to kind of help us stay away from any like extra fatigue that we might face. So, and where this really helps is it allows us full focus. We're going right from that warm up into a very high skill, fast movement as the banded deadlift. And one of the things that I love with the banded deadlift, especially for someone like Daniel, who's trying to chase, a 3X deadlift, is what's called accommodating resistance. So what we start to see here with the accommodated resistance is, as we work through a banded deadlift at a little bit of a lighter load for Daniel, we're getting, the weight starts to increase as that band tension, as the band extends. So as Daniel's moving through probably the hardest part of the deadlift, the band tension is increasing. So if we start with, let's say, just to make it easy, 100 kilos at the bottom, as we get to the top, we might be at like 120 kilos. So that's what that's going to do, is it's going to allow us to actually train the whole range of motion with a weight that increases. It's going to make us a little bit stronger through the harder parts of the movement. And keeping these movements fast, keeping the rest short, just allows us explosive movements at speeds that Daniel can move very well. And the goal here, like I kind of wrote in the notes, was speed. Don't sacrifice speed for weight, and keep the focus on pop here, right? And make sure we're moving through and getting that little sort of speed bump through these types of movements. And then we're going to build on this in the coming weeks, which Daniel obviously uploaded some movements, as you can see here. Let's see, watch Daniel do some speed. Boom. Look at that speed. And as you can see here, if you see that tension in the band right here, as he's standing up to the top, that's definitely going to be a little bit harder, like more weight added. And then as he comes back down, that tension releases as we get to the bottom. But that's the whole goal with something like this. So, Daniel, how did you feel like implementing something like that?
Yeah, we've discussed it during the our first kind of consultation, and I've historically responded pretty well to conjugate method and this style of training. But I was surprised with how much you can make out of 90 kilos and the band.
Yeah.
And I think also with the big thing has been in this, but throughout the whole kind of block and the things we've gone through, is having like super being present and having a good intention on every lift, and kind of treating every rep as it's training, but also practice. So just making sure to put a lot of effort into each rep was a big thing. And I remember, I think we wrote about it during the bench press, and it was good being reminded in like treat this as a 1 rep max, like go really hard, and this variation kind of keeps me more fresh with including the running, rather than going like straight weights and maybe heavier. So it's been nice.
Yeah. And what I want to dive into quickly is we can go right to the second day here, because this, as you can see, it's same type of warm up here. We have a little bit of a different progression for the low level plyometrics, working on more of like a skip type model instead of a pogo. Then we get into the banded bench press. So this is the same idea. And this was kind of what Daniel was talking about. One of the things we talked about with this here was making sure, I think I wrote this in the comments. So I wrote, I want to see a bit more speed on the bench on the press off the chest, try to move it intent, like Daniel just said, with a 1 rep max. So the goal with a lot of this stuff is early on, especially as you're initiating the pattern with the band, is to really explode through that bench. We want to treat this as if we're lifting like the heaviest weight, because that's when we're going to get the most out of the accommodated resistance. That's when, as we're pushing through and gaining that speed, the tension's gaining a little bit on us, which is going to actually help us when we go to lift a normal weight. But this is the same setup as you're going to see on both days. So it's going to be, the only difference here is obviously one's upper, one's lower. And then the movements after this are going to be, upper or lower as well. And with the banded bench press, it's the same idea here. 8 sets of 3 reps at 50 to 60%, somewhere around there. And then we're just short rest, speed, pop off the chest, come back down, rest, speed, pop off the chest, rest. That's why it's really important to keep a weight that we can sustain here and focus on rhythm, because that's how we keep the explosiveness and keep everything. Because this is more like a neurological thing than it is anything else. Anything you were going to say there?
I was just going, this is why, and like, could you encourage me to put some videos in the beginning, or especially in the beginning, but and I think this is on a like broader discussion on, and I think we'll get into that as well, as we've had our continuous discussion about the training plan. Is the more the client puts in, the better design you can write. And if we don't get, and because we have the opportunity in CoachRx to upload videos, and or the client has the opportunity to upload videos, and you can't really get a lot of data, you can get some kind of visuals on how they move, and making sure to encourage that, because sometimes I feel like that coaches lose clients due to they just start writing a program and then they don't encourage the client to give feedback, put videos in, how did you feel? Because the more you put in, the better program or the better design you're going to get. But you also need to, as a coach, explain that to the client, the importance of it. Because then because both client and coach are investing in this and kind of creating and molding the design that's going to be better and better over time. I think it's a cool feature to have that, but also just as coach, encourage your clients to put in as much as they can and as much as they feel comfortable putting in, because then you'll be able to do a better design for them. And that also going to grow, and kind of having patience with the more we put in, the more data we have, the better design we're going to have, and the better discussions we're going to have. So I think that's just a side note on that function, and this shows how important it is for me to put that in, so you can give me feedback on it.
Yeah, and I think I'll say this too, and might be a hot take, but I think a lot of these people who struggle with that is just because they don't have enough like in-person coaching experience. I think when you have enough in-person and coaching experience, you realize how important it is that you have to see how these people are moving. And in the online space, if you're not seeing it, it's almost impossible to make progression based off of, obviously you can look at the numbers and you can look at that sort of thing. But I think when you're in person, you realize how much seeing the individual is, and like how much it means to like actual like visual feedback of a coach to say, hey, yeah, they completed the weight, but like that looked horrible, right? Like that looked like their spine was about to break and they were shaking for 5 minutes after. Like, yeah, they got it done, but it's like, is that the same as like, no, they just did a solid rep there that looked really nice. There's definitely room to grow on that. And I think just looking at the numbers and just looking at like, oh, cool, he hit the check mark, doesn't actually give the feedback I would need as a coach, and anybody would really need as a coach, especially online, right? Where you're not seeing the person, you're not being able to make those adjustments in real time. You're not able to go and talk to them and say, hey, listen, that rep looked really good, but I also want you to add this to it, right? Like, you know, for example, with this video, I was able to see Daniel, the speed he was coming off the chest. Had I not seen the video, all I see is cool. He did the movement and he used 50 kilograms and he did it, right? But as I could see, the video is like, hey, there's a little bit more speed to be had there. There's a little bit more quickness that we can get from this pattern. But that video is what helps and then gives me the ability to communicate back to him so then he can get more out of this. And this is where it kind of builds on each other, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, is I give I prescribe, Daniel does it, gives me feedback. Then we initially like, and it just comes like this, it layers on top of each other until we have something that comes across as like, hey, here's exactly what we need to do when we need to do it, and we execute. Right. And I think that Daniel and I have both talked about this a lot over the past, it's been, well, now going on 3 months of working together. It is cleaning up the communication, making sure everything's going on, everything's being explained properly, and we're both getting what we need out of it. Because just as much as I require the feedback to be better, he requires the same from me to be like, hey, this is how it needs to be done. This is when it needs to be done. These are the changes that need to be done. These are the things I want you to pay attention to, because I'm not there to give those cues. And it's so important to have that back and forth as a coach.
Yeah.
So, so then as we get into the next pieces, one of the things, even just going back to this day here, was really focusing on, you know, the upper body work. I wanted to be very good work that he was going to benefit from, but not take away from the rest of the week. So we worked on some dumbbell bench press, worked into some pulling patterns. And what I tried to do here is basically go through the week working on the, you know, the main, like something that OPEX has always taught me and definitely helped me a lot early on in my coaching career was the main patterns. We have squat, hinge, push, pull, vertical and horizontal for each. Then we have single leg, carry, and core. So just making sure I hit all of those patterns inside of the week allows me to kind of go through the program design, make sure I'm checking off those boxes and fitting them in where it makes sense. And then kind of in this first week here with Daniel was really, we had some numbers from his deadlift. And then the rest of it was just kind of setting some numbers for the week that we could build off of in the coming month. And then making sure that some of the accessory movement matched the things that I wanted to see in regards to improving these main movements. So trying to think, I think maybe I'll get into a couple other things. So anything you want to add to that, Daniel?
No, it's no, not really. Go ahead.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So then one of the other things that Daniel
Brandon,
really
can I drop in a question for you?
Yeah.
So someone in our comments, you guys have a few comments. Obviously, Carl jumped in and said, 2 of the best in the game. Keep going, gentlemen. And you're getting some love in the likes and the hearts and the comments. But we do have a question about when you're creating a program for a client, and obviously you're in the client calendar right now, specific for Daniel's client account. I think this question is related to our programs library. Are you adding these programs also to the programs library? And do you, I guess, reuse components, or what is your take? Maybe this person is not an individual design coach, to think about the difference between one-to-one coaching and what would go in the programs library. So if you just want to hit on that at some point.
Yeah. So I don't normally add them into the program unless I feel there's something that I like can use again in some capacity. Cause a lot of this stuff, like with the condensed conjugate, this is just a framework that I followed for a bit now. So I kind of have an idea. I do have a couple condensed conjugate programs that I go to look back on, that if I ever kind of need a refresher, if there's some ideas that I've had that I felt were, you know, really high level programs that I've written. But, you know, there are times, especially when I write some of this stuff, that I do add into a program add it to a program just to have it. You know, with Daniel's, I haven't yet. If I do, I usually wait till I'm done with 3 months of it, just so I can have that as like a 3-month program. And then I add that in there, because there's definitely like Daniel's, there's a lot of stuff I really have enjoyed in here that I've written, and I think that has that's turned out really well. So this is definitely something I would consider, like, hey, I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna probably take, make this some sort of program, put it into the program section, add it as an example for myself in case I ever want to go back and do something like this. But in the case of, using this for anybody else, I would probably use it as like a framework at some point if there was someone who came along, but I wouldn't just like copy and paste this over. I would make sure that a lot of these movements are changed in regards to what they need, the structure, because one of the things we're going to get to in a second was actually the layout, because there was a couple of things we did in this first month that we ended up having to change to make sure we were feeling good. But I think a lot of these concepts are obviously the same that go into a program. And when you add it to the program section, obviously you can come back, use it, change the things you need to do, and it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, actually, that was Michael in our ambassador crew. So you guys know where that question came from in case there's follow up there. And then I would just say that I will probably twist these guys' arms eventually to add unique programs to the programs library from their perspective, because there are awesome coaches. There are about 65 templates in there, all very goal-based. So feel free to browse the programs library if you use it. Yeah. But obviously, most of the coaches using the platform are individual design coaches, and they're designing based on client assessment and priorities. So go back at it.
Cool. Daniel, were you going to add something?
No, I was just going to say that I don't know about you, but I might have like saved the progressions or like pieces that I might use, but I don't have that many like full programs because it varies so much for the individual. Yeah. But it might be that I've written a squat cycle that I like, or and I try to kind of explain the purpose and things behind it, and I save it in programs and into the program library. But then it's hard to have a like complete template because it's going to vary obviously, but it's nice to have or save if you had let's say a running progression you were really happy with. I kind of break it down and throw it into the programs just to make sure I have it there, because it's more kind of having the components and tools and then combining them into an individual design rather than it being kind of written for the first time always.
And I think this is, again, we did have a question. I'll just read it quick. It says, do you guys coach yourselves? Do any of you find it doable to constantly challenge yourself and raising the bar in your own programming for yourself? So just to answer that quickly, I think this is like literally the conversation that Daniel and I are having in like the first video, and this is why we're doing it, is that I think there's different ways to challenge yourself as a coach. I don't think it always needs to be like, well, let me say this. I think having a coach is great. And, I think having someone who can push you, because most of the time individuals aren't going to make the workout as hard as they need to, or they're not going to think outside the box. Cause I don't know if you ever heard the idea of like, sometimes when you're too deep in the forest, like it's hard to see, like you got to take a step back and kind of like, get out of it to see a lot of the things, to be able to actually fully digest and understand where you're at. When you're in the middle of it, you're like, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how to do this. But then you step back and you're like, oh, okay, well, I just needed to go this way. And, all of that. So having a coach and someone who's kind of overviewing this and telling you like, hey, because Daniel, I'm more than sure Daniel is capable of doing this if he wanted to. Right. And it's just like, hey, I wanted someone to kind of come in, revamp things, take a step back as a coach and go through that client progression to not only revamp his own process of it, but have a new perspective, have someone push him, have someone that he can't, hey, like, when you write your own program, I think sometimes you can go in and say, yeah, I wrote it, I can change it. Right. Or, it's just not a good day, and you can make little adjustments here and there. When you're staying accountable to somebody, when you have to kind of go through that process and say, someone's, wrote this out for me because they think this is in my best interest. I'm going to go through and do it as best as I can. And some of the times, most of the time, you're going to be able to get deeper and deeper down that path because someone's actually pushing you down the path, right? Sometimes if you're doing it yourself, you might stop a little bit early, might cut it a little bit short. You don't know, like someone like myself, I've actually in the past year had a coach for a lot of different aspects of, designing program, designing, like the client experience, all of that, because I wanted to create like such a high experience for myself to anybody that came in with me. And I wanted to revamp all this stuff, and it helps me tremendously. And I think that at every point someone needs a coach, because you don't just like get born and wake up and are good at this stuff. And it's really good to refine everything and continuously like grow through that. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I think it's useful to think about the purpose. Let's say, because I in the beginning explained that I usually go back and forth between kind of wanting to play around with my own, doing my own design, testing out different stuff and experiencing that. But going back to what's the purpose? It's me as a coach playing with stuff that I want to kind of experience before I put them on my clients. Is that optimal for my training and my progression as of me and my fitness? Maybe not, but that's not the purpose of it. So I think it's also useful to just take a step back. So is the purpose to get the optimal best kind of training plan and accountability and all that? Yeah, then you probably always need a coach, or many people need it. But as a coach, it's also useful to use the training as your lab, where you're playing around with principles. But that doesn't mean that I believe that would be the best scenario for me and my own fitness. And I might leave some progression on the table, but that's fine, because that's not the purpose of it. Yeah. So just thinking about why also being coach is really useful as a progression or input for coaches developing themselves and kind of experiencing the client journey just for that sake as well. So I think it's also useful to just think about the purpose and why you're getting coached, or if you want to do your own design, that's fine as well.
Yeah.
This is sort of a related question to the programs library question, like if you're taking components of your individual designs and putting them in library. But this one I interpret more as like just the concept of playing with designs for specific avatars. Yeah. And I know James used to hit on this a lot, just the going through the practice of designing and making the design process a part of your daily habit, like journaling, picking an avatar and designing for that specific avatar just as practice. So I think that is also something, Daniel, to your point, learning through your training, learning through design, and then going and testing it in your own lab.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, personally, I've, even in writing program design, I think I've learned the most when I go and do things, right? And I think that's what Daniel was kind of hinting on before. It was like, and I like the way you worded it. Like, I like the way you put it. Like, the purpose of your training at that point was like, hey, I want to play around with some stuff. It might not be 100% where I need to be training wise, but this is going to help me with understanding what I'm writing, understanding, how I'm designing, what it feels like. And I think this is another thing too, on top of like what we kind of talked about a couple minutes ago, where coaches maybe not having that experience of seeing people enough. Like, training is one of those things where you learn a lot. You learn like, hey, if I wrote a program design and it looks great on paper, right? But then you actually go and do it and you're like, this is miserable. The supersets like all the way across the gym, and it just doesn't really make sense. My arms are really burned out when I'm going to the next pattern. Like, you don't know until you do it. And I think with one of the things that I take pride in myself is most of the things I program, unless there's something that, it's very rare that I actually like go and write something that I haven't at least tried myself in some capacity, because, not everything I write I've gone and done, but like there's a big portion that I've used in my like coaching career and my own training that is like, hey, this works really well, right? A lot of what I'm working with Daniel is stuff that I know works really well because I've been through this when I was going through a phase where I wanted to hit certain strength numbers, where I was, again, utilizing this type of programming for efficient people, or making efficiency in the programming to make sure they're getting everything they need while not burning out. And I think that's such an important aspect of coaching, is like being in the gym, testing this stuff out. But then, like Daniel said, when the purpose comes, it's like, hey, I'm trying to get somewhere. There's something specific I want. If you don't, and I think it's also, the last thing I'll say, and I think it's also very like, you have to be aware as an individual. Like, if you follow your programs and you tend to like veer off, or after a couple of weeks you get bored or that sort of thing, then like how is a coach not going to be beneficial to keeping you on track, right? If you're disciplined and all you need is a little bit of structure, aka someone like Daniel, is like, hey, that's an easy fix too. Like, let's go get a coach. Let's fill in the gaps and go from there. I think that's a real big thing as well as a coach, is just being aware of what you need to take that next step, especially as a client as well. Kind of forgot where we're at here. We at the running, I believe. Well, let me go through this. Let me go through the last strength day and then we'll get into it. So, with these two upper and lower engine days, the goal obviously was to hammer home the deadlift, which we worked on a little bit. We have the 6 sets of 3, really trying to work at a heavy percentage here. And this was the very beginning of the progression, working in between this set and focus on control of the whole range of motion, making sure we're getting enough volume here, and then working on the enough load to create that adaptation as well. Then we worked on some deficit deadlifts after that at a little bit of a lower percentage, obviously working through a little bit bigger of a range of motion with that, and then some accessories for the lower body as well. So with the deadlift being the main focus, and Daniel, what I want to do here, I want to go through this, briefly touch over the progression for the rest of the month, and then talk about how we change things with the time remaining. One of the things I love to do as well inside of programming is I really like bodybuilding days on something like this. And when I say bodybuilding days, this is just more of isolated movement patterns, simpler movement patterns, things that are focusing on smaller muscles that we might not actually put 100% focus on normally during some of these bigger movement patterns. And the reason I like doing this is because I think when we're talking about like efficiency and program design, finding ways to get work done without actually like causing too much energy cost throughout the week is really important. And a bodybuilding day allows us to, like for example, working on a pullover, you're not going to be able to go so heavy on a pullover that you're going to be fatigued and need a nap after for the rest of the day, right? A dumbbell full raise is not going to be something you're going to be able to go over 15 pounds on if you're doing it correctly. A hammer curl is just to get a pump in the arms, a skull crusher is just to get a pump in the arms, and then some core work over here is just to kind of work on some basic things while still getting a lot of work done that, mechanically speaking, and how the body moves and then loading perspective, are not going to be taxing enough to ruin it, right? So for me, when you look at these first 4 days, we have 2 really big days with the lifts. We have 2 big days with these runs. And then we have a nice relaxing day that's still getting a lot of work done, but not costing Daniel as much. So to me, this is almost like a recovery day with an actual rest day that leads into a bigger run. And that was my initial thinking here, and something that I've always worked with on some of the athletes, because, for bigger athletes who are fighting, the beginnings of the week are very heavy. The ends of the week tend to be a little bit lighter. So that gives them a little bit of extra recovery time where they're still getting to come into the gym and they're getting work done, but they're not taxing themselves, and they get the weekend to kind of rest. Now, one of the things we added in here was a third running day in the beginning. And we were just working on, light, moderate paces, things like that. And for the rest of the month, the layout was the same. And this is something important that me and Daniel talked about earlier with the warm-up. But when you work on patterns here and you work on movements, like, you need to kind of create consistency inside the program. And you don't want to see one week be focused on this and then the next week focus on something else, because that doesn't help you as a coach, and that doesn't help the individual actually get better at this stuff, right? You need time under some of these movements. You need slight progression. So even just looking at this deadlift day, we had the banded bench press, we had the deadlift, the deficit deadlifts, and the accessories, right? So we had 50 to 60% week one. On week 2, we went up just a little bit at 55 to 60%, just a slight increase in weight, but the band tension, everything else stays the same. For the deadlift, we were at 70 to 75%, but we were looking at a little bit of an increase. So if Daniel hit 70% week 1, we're looking at like 71 to 72% in week 2. Again, very small increase. Same thing with the deficit deadlifts, and then the same thing with the accessory work. So, and that's the same thing for both days, just small increases, small percentage increases, and making sure that when he goes in, he knows what's going on, just executing on the movements and then getting in, getting out. Would you say that sums it up pretty well, Daniel?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then for the bodybuilding, again, we have, a different type of, so not different. We have the same type of thing here, just really slowly increasing it, if at all. Really with these, my goal with those is to work up to a heavy weight. And then the week after is just to kind of use that heavy weight across all the reps to make sure, we're getting a little bit of loading pattern here. And then we're still not like burning ourselves out physically. So one of the things throughout this month, obviously, like I said, we had everything the same. Me and Daniel realized 2 things. One was the running was a bit too, not much, but almost like there was too much energy being spent on the running, right? I think that's how we could word that.
Yeah, it's I think I had just looking at the week and having the deadlift as the main effort, the running took a bit too much kind of energy, and I needed to do some of the sessions quite early, starting to dig quite deep in terms of expression and intensity, and we realized that it might be a bit too much, or at least if we have like the deadlift as the top priority, thinking about that, it would benefit from maybe pulling the run back a bit. So going back to priorities, what we set out in the beginning to do was get after the deadlift. We noticed after those first 4 weeks that we need to pull back to running, just to guard that top principle within the program.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that was really, apparent was, and this is why, like we said before, the notes are so important. Having this feature on the app is really, really good, right? We started to even look at, the way Daniel started to comment in this third week was, where were we? We had started to feel a little bit, even just having some things here. Hopefully it's okay if I share this, Daniel, but when the heart rate was getting a little bit higher, he was dealing with a little bit of anxiety through that sort of training. Still got it done, went well. Then we started to get kind of into the deadlifts. Then we had really tough, felt legs. The legs felt heavy from the beginning. Could feel the hamstring having a tendency to cramp up. It's another like little warning sign. Then this day was like felt heavy, but went okay. Job done, right? When you start to see comments like that, that's when we can start to say like, all right, like, are we in need of a deload? Is this too much? Do we need to change some stuff? And this is why the communication is really important, because I started to see those comments. Me and Daniel sat down. This was about the third week of our training, and I had reached out after I saw a couple of those comments and just wanted to check in and see where he was at. And we decided to make 3 main changes, right? This next week, the main change was just taking away that run on Sunday and just allowing him an extra full day of rest on the weekend, right? Not only does that help him physically, it helps him kind of throughout his week and making sure everything's, he has more time with his family and friends on the weekend. He has more time to just specifically rest, work on the business, whatever he wants to spend that time doing. And then the other changes we focused on were in the actual training block. The next 4 weeks that we designed was changing the day of the deadlift to be the first day as opposed to the third day, right? If the deadlift's the main focus of Daniel's training right now, it should be after he's best rested, had a full weekend of sleep, food, recovery, all of that, coming off fresh into the deadlift right away. And I think the way that I designed it early on, after a full upper body day, after a run, was not putting Daniel in the best position to focus solely on the deadlift. And then obviously having 3 days of running on top of that probably wasn't helping, because essentially he was only getting like a day and a half of recovery here on Friday and Saturday. And then he had a big run, then another training day. And it just, I don't think I was setting him up for success inside of his goal of like hitting the deadlift, right? But we sat down, organized, reorganized, kind of took a little different approach with the running and went a little bit more broad on the time as opposed to outcome based. So it was a little bit more like, here's a time. I want you to kind of do what you can inside that time at a pace that feels comfortable. So we're still getting the volume in, but we're not having to hit any specific paces and really tire the body out, right? We made that change, made a couple little changes into the dynamic effort stuff, and tried to focus a little bit more on pieces that weren't going to be as demanding on the body. And especially before the deadlift, stuff that's just going to get the nervous system firing. That's quick, easy, boom, right to the deadlift, right? This week here, we took a little bit of a deload as I kind of changed the movement patterns for him to get used to inside of that. And then the first full week back, we got right back into it. So we worked on the deadlift at a higher percentage, 5x3. We worked on a GHD hip extension just to kind of reiterate that hinging pattern. And then we worked on some of the lunging patterns as well, with a little bit of a heavier load here with some rest in between that would allow him to push the weight and still not overdo it on some of those reps, right? Then we adjusted the running.
So, just to stay on that with, if we take the deload and kind of the tough week before the deload, I think it highlights the importance of like we discussed it before, like encourage your clients to communicate with them, because only then can you. This is an example of how this program and program design grows through our conversation as a coach-client relationship, and it can only be done if you get kind of in data or having that conversation and encourage your clients to leave the comments. Because let's say I just check the boxes, feeling terrible, give it another week, and I might not feel like doing the workouts, or my compliance will drop. So I think this highlights the importance of, it might seem like small stuff, but getting your clients to comment on pieces and how they feel. And I know you do a really good job on checking in, like in general, how are we feeling? And it's so important to, for one, have that platform, the relationship piece, to be able to have do a really good program design, but also encourage them to take part and also be present as a coach, so you get that back. Because it's obviously not a very big change in the design, but it made a huge difference in going forward. So, and also what I strongly believe in being open to kind of coach the client, not the program. So it's not about, you could have gone the way where you kind of encouraged me, giving me some just trying to motivate me to get back on track, or trying to motivate me to get into the groove again. Whereas if you're flexible as a coach to kind of take a step back, what does these comments, what does it tell me? And then kind of alter the design to fit where we're at in kind of the bigger picture. So I think it's a cool example of the importance of the relationship there.
Yeah, and I think this is something that me and Daniel have discussed a lot, because I think this is an really important aspect. And one thing, this is actually one thing Daniel really was like wanted to touch on, and I'm glad he wanted to, because I do think this is so important. And I think this piece really, again, everything he said times 100 is just like it makes it so much better of a design. And even like he said, we didn't make that big of a change. Like essentially we just swapped the days and allowed him a better chance of success in his program, right? And that's all we really did. And we just tried to fit in, because I think as a coach, anytime I try to write design, I make sure that the framework fits more than just what I need it to be. And that's another big thing, is I always talk about like stimulus over patterns and that sort of thing. Like if you know the stimulus you're trying to achieve, then you can fit whatever you need into that, as long as you're getting the stimulus. And I think that's where program design comes in. It's the same idea. Candace is back. Does that mean we're
No, I just wanted to check in with you guys on time. And I also had a question. I was thinking, when you were discussing whether or not you needed to make that adjustment or consider a deload, was there anything in lifestyle trends that you guys were paying attention to also?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think for me, I'm always looking at this stuff, and this is something that is one of the bigger features that Coach RX just implemented. But Daniel's been really good at keeping all this stuff, and this is something I'm trying to be better about my other clients as well, is making sure they're on top of this. Because I think even for me, I think Daniel, you told me you had like a really low resting heart rate, didn't you?
Yeah, I have. Like last night, it was 2 nights ago, it was 35.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, 39, 35, 36, 37. Like that's really low for a resting heart rate. So these pieces right here are really important, because if you're starting to see some of these, or looking at some of these pieces, right, and we start to see, obviously the steps are pretty consistent for the most part. If the sleep is starting to dwindle, if we're going like, hey, he had a really bad week, and we're starting to see 7, 6, 6, 5, like the sleep's going down, then we're looking at the recovery score going down. We're looking at his resting heart rate going up. Like that's something where we want to start to pay attention to some of these pieces, and, go through make sure we're paying attention to all this stuff, and make sure all of these pieces are making sense before we make program design. Does that make sense? Anything to add to that?
No, it's, and also keeping in mind that numbers are individual, and we're more looking for trend than absolute scores. And kind of figuring out so what are the story of these numbers telling me, and can we add the comments and everything that we experienced in the relationship, in the design to this? Does it give us a better picture or better ways to make decisions? And probably.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest part here is just they're like Daniel said, they're trends. So we just got to pay attention to those
Will
things.
you guys click on, Brandon, will you go click on the insights on there? So you see how you see like the green trend line under movement, like moving with great consistency. So then the insight pops up. So I don't know if everyone is playing with this yet, but these insights are great. And then also on the coaching dashboard, those insights were just recently added along with status rings and hover profiles. So there's so many cool things coming that just like make it easier for you to intuitively know what needs to be done when you open up your operating system every day.
Yeah. But yeah, I think I think that I covered most of the important stuff that we wanted to hit on in regards to the programming, and then really me and Daniel have just been working through making sure a lot of these progressions are still feeling good. The numbers are still going up. He's feeling energized working through the program. I've really enjoyed the process of working with Daniel because he's a coach as well. So he understands a lot of these pieces, and we've been able to go back and forth and have some, really good progression and conversation in the program design.
Amazing. Well, that's about an hour, so I don't want to dominate your guys' day. Yeah. I know Brandon you need to get back to the gym probably, and Daniel, you've got some clients to finish up before you close out your day. But I appreciate you guys sharing. And we're thinking we're probably going to try to do this frequently, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. So if you all have any requests for client avatars, client scenarios, programming questions, please, again, comment below this video. We'll review them before the next live stream, and the guys will get working on some more avatars and designs to share with you, and we're here for it. So any famous last words?
I'll see you next time. Peace.
Yeah, let's go out with that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. I'm going to end the stream. We appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.